Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. I'm Chris, and today we are going to continue on with our Pac-Man clone by implementing 2D gameplay, right? We're going to make it so that we can play with two players. We can have Pac-Man and Pac-Man both playing. This isn't going to be like a weird, crazy versus thing. It's just basically turn-based play, right? So, sounds simple, but not so much. I actually sat here quite some time to compile all of my notes to actually get to the point where I can make this an easy lesson for you guys and try not to confuse you along the way. So, I've kind of broken it out into, hey, this is what we're going to do in the UI, and then we're going to get into the coding part of it. And the UI stuff is actually very, very minimal, and we're going to jump into that right now. I don't know what you've got loaded, if you've got game menu or level loaded, but for this change we're going to need to load level. So we're going to go over to our project. Let me center this. Alright, so we're in our project, and then we're going to go into our scenes folder and double click on level. And here we see the level, but we actually need to get to the canvas. So in the hierarchy, if we click on canvas, we've got player text and ready text. We're going to modify these two, okay? So clicking on player text, and just so you know what I'm talking about here, is it's this player text right here. If we zoom out, we can see that this is the UI. So we're going to make a change to player text and ready text. So that's player and ready. So if we click on player, we're going to just change the font size to 30. And we're going to do the same thing for ready. We're going to change it from 34 to 30. And that's because what's going to happen here is our UI is not going to just say player and ready anymore. It's going to say player 1 ready or player 2 ready, depending on which one is going to play. And then it's also going to say either player 1 game over or player 2 game over. And if we kept the font size at 34, the 1 after the player wouldn't have been able to be seen. It would have been cut off, and the same thing with game over. It would not have fit into this space. We could have expanded it out a little, but what would have happened then is if we go look at our maze, let's see here, we zoom in on that. So player and ready is here. If we have game over, it's basically taking up this entire space here. If we would have left the font bigger and we would have made the area wider, then it would have extended across here and it would have looked funky. So just trust me, we're going to keep the fonts at 30 and that's going to be perfect, okay? So now that we've got that done, we can open up a script, and we'll start with the game menu script, alright? So what are we going to do in the game menu script? Well, right now, we need to be able to keep track of the player's lives, okay? So right now the way we're doing that is we've got just one variable, and that's in our game board script, and it's called Pac-Man lives. Well, if we've got two players, then we need to keep track of two lives, right? We need the player 1's lives, and we need player 2's lives. So what we're going to put these in the game menu, because the game menu is a class that will never get reloaded unless, unless of course you quit the entire game and restart the game. Then the game menu class will get reloaded, but at that point it doesn't matter, because then you should start out with the amount of lives that you're going to have. So, because the game menu class only gets loaded once, we can set a static variable that is going to hold its value across the entire game until we quit the game and restart it, right? So in the game menu, we're going to add two public variables, and they're going to be statics, and they're going to be integers, and we're going to call them lives player 1, and we're going to do another one, public static int lives player 2. Alright? So, along with our lives for the players, we are going to need to know, and we're already doing this, I believe, in the game board class. So if we look in the game board class, and we see these two integers here, we've got player 1 pellets consumed, and player 2 pellets consumed. We're going to throw those in the game menu class as well, right? Because that's just better practice. So we're going to do public static int player 1 pellets consumed, and we're going to set that equal to 0. Same thing here, public static int player 2 pellets consumed, and equals 0. Alright, so now what we want to do is we want to initialize these lives player 1 and lives player 2 variables. Okay, and the best place to initialize those would be right down here in the get key up method when we're pressing enter. Okay, so when we press enter to start the game, we want to say lives player 1 equals 3 and lives player 2 equals 3. So we're assigning 3 lives to each of the players. Now we want to check to see if it is one player game. Okay, so if it's only a one player game, meaning that the player chose to play a one player game, we want to set lives player 2 equal to 0. Alright? Because what we're going to do shortly is we're going to modify another file that is going to check to see if the player 1 and player 2 lives are 0 to trigger a game over. So we want the lives of player 2 to be 0 if the player has chosen to only play a one player game. Okay, because we don't need player 2 lives if we're only playing a one player game. So that's the file. We're going to save it. And that's the modifications that we're going to make in game menu. Alright? Now we've got another class that we need to make some changes in, and that's tile. Alright? So what we're going to do in tile is we are going to, instead of assigning did consume, alright, so did consume, let me just backtrack a little bit. Did consume is used to store true or false for the pellet that's been consumed or not. Okay, so Pac-Man goes along consuming pellets. He consumes a pellet, and then did consume is set to true for that specific pellet, and that's stored in the board array. Okay, so how do we know if player 1 or player 2 consumed a pellet? Well, the easy way to do this is to get rid of did consume, and we're going to create 2 new ones. We're going to call them public bool. We're going to call them did consume player 1 and another one, and we'll call it consume player 2. So now we've got did consume player 1 and did consume player 2. Alright, so those are gonna be our new booleans that are gonna hold the value of whether or not the player 1 has consumed the pellet or the player 2 has consumed the pellet. So what we need to do next now is we need to actually go into the Pac-Man script. Alright, and we need to actually modify our consume pellet method. Alright, so let's scroll down to that. And where are you? Consume pellet. Move. Update. Consume pellet. Alright. So here we are at our consume pellet method. And what we're going to do is we are going to basically, let's see, yeah, what we could do, right? No, what we're actually going to do is we're going to ignore all of this stuff here at the moment, okay? And we're going to create a Boolean value. We're going to call this did consume. Alright, and we're going to set that equal to false. First of all, this variable isn't going to make much sense to you at the moment, but it will in a few minutes. So, just trust me on that. What we're going to do now is we're going to just basically do an if statement, and we're going to say if gameboard dot is player 1 up. So we're saying, hey, is it player 1's turn? Otherwise, no, it's player 2's turn. Okay. So if it's player 1's turn, we're going to say if not tile did consume player 1 and tile dot is pellet or tile.isSuperPellet, then we do something. Alright? And in the else statement, we're going to say if not tile.didConsume player 2 and tile.isPellet or tile.isSuperPellet, we're going to do something else. Alright, so quickly, let's go over what we did here. We took this if statement that used to say if not tile.didConsume and tile is pellet or tile is superpellet. So that's saying that if the tile hasn't been consumed, okay, and the tile is either a pellet or a superpellet, then we want to go in and continue to do stuff. Alright? So here we have to check in a different way. We have to say if player 1, right, consumed, didn't consume, right? If it's player 1's turn and player 1 didn't consume the tile, and it's a pellet or it's a super pellet, then we want to do stuff. Otherwise, if it's not player 1's turn, then we want to check to see if player 2 didn't consume the tile, and the tile is a pellet or the tile is a super pellet. So in here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say did consume equals true, because, and we're going to do this for both of them, because there are some things that are going to be common to these two if statements that we don't want to have to write twice. So, and that's why we're setting this did consume equals true, because here we're going to say if did consume, right, meaning that did consume is true, then we do what's in the if statement. We don't know what that's going to be just yet, but we will soon. So we set did consume to true because if he hasn't consumed it and it is a pellet or a super pellet, then it is going to be consumed. Alright? And the way that it's going to be consumed is we're going to say tile.didConsume player 1 equals true. So we're setting that property of that specific tile to true. Same thing here, tile.didConsume player 2 equals true. Alright? So we're setting both of these equal to true. Well, not both of them, but we're setting whichever one is true equal to true. Then what we're going to do is we're going to increment the score that is appropriate for the player that's playing. So game board dot player 1 score plus equals 10. Okay? And then we're going to increase the pellets consumed, game menu, player 1 pellets consumed, plus plus. And then down here, we're going to do the same thing, game board dot player 2 score plus equals 10. And then game menu dot player 2 pellets consumed, increment. Alright? So these are the things that are independent to who is playing, player 1 or player 2. Now we're going to edit some things that are specific, that are not specific to which player is playing, such as we're going to do o.getComponent sprite renderer .enabled equals false. So we're going to disable the sprite renderer on the pellet that was consumed. We're going to play the chomp sound. We are going to check to see if the tile is a super pellet. And if it is a super pellet, then we want to, of course, iterate over our ghosts. So we're going to do game object, and we're going to create an array of ghosts by finding the game objects with the tag of ghosts. So game object.find game objects with tag ghost. And be sure that when you're doing this that you're using game objects with tag. Game objects with an S. Because if you do find game object with tag, it'll only find one, and it'll only create one object in that array, and then you'll have problems. I see a lot of people asking questions just because they forgot to add the S after object, so they end up with just one instead of the entire list of ghosts that come with that tag. Okay? So then what we're going to do is a for each loop. We're going to iterate over all of the ghosts. Okay, so for each game object, go in ghosts, what we're going to do is we're going to say go.getComponent. We're going to get the ghost script component, and we're going to say start frightened mode, and that's that. Now, we've basically replicated everything that was in this if statement, so we can now highlight that, okay? So we're going to highlight from here all the way down to, here's the first curly bracket, and the second curly bracket, and the third curly bracket, okay? You should have 3 curly brackets left after that before you start with the next method, okay? So we're going to just delete that. And then we're going to delete the blank space so to make everything look nice. Alright, so now we have our newly created, or not newly created, newly modified consume pellet method that is now optimized for 2-player gameplay. Okay? So the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to modify the set difficulty. Where is that? That's up here at the top somewhere. There it is. We need to go in and we need to set a different difficulty, and that is going to be that of level 1, right? Because what happens is if the first player plays to level 2 and then gets killed by a ghost, sounds so vulgar, gets killed by a ghost, or let's just say defeated by a ghost, then what'll happen is the second player playing will also play on level 2 because level 1 doesn't exist, or level 1 exists. So basically what we're doing is we're adding if the level equals 1, okay? Because before we always assumed that the level would be 1 because that's where the player is starting if it's a 1-player game. But if one of them is starting at level 2 and the other one could be starting at level 1, we still need to know what level 1's going to be. Okay? So speed is going to be 6 on level 1, and that's the default for speed. If we look up here, actually the default for speed used to be 4. It should be 6, so let's go ahead and set it to that. The default speed for Pac-Man is 6, and level 1 is going to be 6, right? So all the way up to level 5 it changes to 10. So, and yep, that'll be all we're going to do in the Pac-Man script. So let's save that. Let's close that. We can close the game menu script. We can close the tile script. And really all we've got left now is the ghost script and the game board script. So, for the ghost script, we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to modify the set difficulty for level. Oh, you know what? We forgot something. Pac-Man. We need to be able to access this set difficulty for level method outside of the Pac-Man class. So we're going to add the public keyword in front of void so that that method now becomes accessible outside of its own class. So we're going to save that, close it, and then go into Ghost. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to add the public keyword in front of the void in front of set difficulty for level so that this can be accessible outside of its own class. Excuse me. So now we need to add if level equals 1, alright, else if level equals 2, of course. So really simple. To make this change, I'm not going to rewrite all of these, so I'm just going to copy and paste, and then we're going to modify them. It's going to be 7 for timer 1, 7 for timer 2, 5 for timer 3, 5 for timer 4, 20 for timer 1, 20 for timer 2, 20 for timer 3, and the frighten mode duration is actually going to be 10. Start blinking is going to be 7. We're going to have 5 for Pinky release timer, 14 for Inky, and 21 for Clyde. And then we're going to have our move speed is going to be 5.9, our normal move speed 5.9, our frightened move speed 2.9, and our consumed move speed is going to be 15. Alright, so that takes care of that, and that's all we need to do in the ghost method. That's the only modification we're going to make here, okay? So, because the ghosts don't care if it's player 1 or player 2 playing, of course. So now we're going to get into the biggest modification of them all. We are going to modify quite a few things in here. So I'm going to try to move as fast as I can and explain as much as I can while I'm doing it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the Pac-Man lives variable, which is up here. We are also going to remove the player 1 pellets consumed and player 2 pellets consumed variables. Alright. And then we're going to create 2 new methods, and we're going to create those at the very bottom. And the first one is... Actually, let's not create those yet. Let's make a change to check pellets consumed, and that is right here. We've got check pellets consumed, okay, and right now it's looking for player 1 pellets consumed, but we moved that to game menu, and we made it static so we can just reference the game class. So we can do game menu dot player 1 pellets consumed, and here game menu dot player 2 pellets consumed. All right. So, with that change, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to update the update UI method, and that one is right here. Okay, this one is looking for Pac-Man lives 3, 2, and Pac-Man lives to see if it equals 3, 2, or 1, and that's used to display the proper amount of Pac-Man icons at the bottom of the screen. So what we're going to do is first we're going to say, hey, if is player 1 up, okay, else it's player 2's turn. So player 1's playing here, and if player 1's playing, let's just copy this here, okay, I'm going to do copy and paste. Actually, we're going to delete this whole thing out now from the bottom, and it's still up here. So we're just going to change Pac-Man lives to game menu dot lives player 1. Same thing here. Pac-Man lives is going to be game menu dot lives player 1, and this one too. Pac-Man lives is going to be game menu lives player 1. Okay, and then we're going to copy all of that, and we're going to paste it in the else statement, and we're going to change all the player 1s to player 2, because now that we know player 2 is playing, we need to check to see how many lives player 2 has, and if player 2 has 3, 2, or 1 lives, we're going to display the proper amount of Pac-Man images. Okay, alright, so that actually finishes up the update UI method. So now what we need to do is we need to update our player win method. Alright, player win, what we want to do is we want to make sure that this process win coroutine only gets called once. Okay, so I made this mistake, and this may have been a bug before or not. I don't know if you guys had noticed it, but if it's outside of here, where we're checking if it didn't increment the level, then it's going to be called more than once. So we're going to need to basically cut, and we're going to paste that into here and into here. Okay? And that's all we're going to do for the player win method. And again, all this does is it makes sure that this is only called the one time. Okay? Depending on which player is winning. Alright, now we're at the point where we can create... Yeah, let's do that. Let's create some new methods. We're going to create two of them. One is going to be called reset pellets for player. So we're going to do void reset pellets for player, and then we're going to do an integer parameter, and we're just going to call it player num. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to collect all the objects. So we're going to do object objects equals game object dot find objects of type, and again remember this is plural, so it's objects, not object. And we're going to do type of game object. So it's going to find all of the game objects that are in the scene. Then we're going to do for each, because we need to iterate over them. We're going to do game object O and objects. So everything that is stored in the objects array, we're going to iterate over that. I'm going to say if O.getComponent tile doesn't equal null, meaning that it has a tile component, okay? Then we're going to say if O.getComponent tile is pellet, or O.getComponent tile dot is tile dot is super pellet. Okay. So first we're checking to see if tile is not null, and then we're checking to see if it's a pellet or a super pellet. And if it is, then we check to see if player num is equal to 1, and if it's not, then it's player 2. And if it is equal to 1, okay, what we want to do is we want to say O.getComponent tile did consume player 1 equals false. And here, if it's player 2, we want to say O.getComponent tile did consume, did consume player 2 equals false. Alright. So, you might be asking yourself, why are we setting all of these to false? This method is going to be called when we start the next level, okay? So when we start the next level, instead of reloading the scene like we did before, where the board gets reinitialized, we can't break the board, okay? We can't reload the scene and let the board be recreated, because we've got two players playing on the same board now, okay? And the objects that are stored in that board, they hold two values, one for player 1 and one for player 2. If player 1 goes to the next level and we destroy the board and recreate it, then all of the values for all the pellets that player 2 consumed in the level that he's currently in, those will go away. So we can't do that. We can't reload the scene. So we have to make it look as though we are reloading the scene. So what we're doing is when we call reset pellets for player, we check to see, okay, well, is it player 1? And what we do is we grab all the objects, we see if the object that we've grabbed is a tile, and if it is, then we're going to check to see if it's a pellet or a super pellet, okay? And if player 1 is currently the player that we want to reset the pellets for, then we're going to set all of these to false, so none of them will have been consumed, okay? So what we're going to do next is we're going to create another method, and that method is actually going to redraw the board. So it's going to take all the pellets that have been previously consumed that are no longer consumed. Those are going to then get redrawn, okay? And the redraw is not just because you're going to the next level, it's also when you're changing players. Because you want to draw, let's say player 1 ate all these pellets down at the bottom, now it's player 2's turn. Well, player 2 didn't eat the ones at the bottom yet, he only ate the one at the top. So we have to reflect those pellets. So basically what happens is we have to load the pellets, we have to load the board according to the player who's playing. So that's going to happen in this next method. And that one is going to be called void redraw board. And very simple, okay? So we're going to redraw the board. And we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to do object, and we're going to do objects. So we're creating an objects array, game object dot find objects of type, and then type of game object. And then we're going to iterate over that. We're going to do game object O in objects. Okay. And then we're going to check to see if O dot get component tile does not equal null, making sure that it actually has a tile script component. And if it does, we're going to check to see if O dot get component get component tile is pellet, or O dot get component tile is super pellet. Okay. So once we do that, we're going to check to see whose turn it is, right? If is player 1 up, because we need to know who we redraw the board for. Is it going to be player 1 or player 2? If player 1's up, then what we're going to do is we're going to say if O.getComponent tile did consume player 1, then we say O.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals false, else O.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals true. And we're going to do the same thing for player 2. Okay, if O.getComponent tile did consume player 2, then O.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals false. Otherwise, O.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals true. Alright, so what is this doing? Well, again, this is grabbing all the objects in the scene, then it's iterating over all the objects in the array, then we check to see if it's got a tile script component. If it does, we check to see if it's a pellet or a super pellet. And then if it is, then we check to see if player 1's playing or player 2. Suppose player 1 is playing. What we need to do now is it's player 1's turn, right? So we say, hey, did the current tile, was that consumed by player 1? Right? If it was consumed, then we want to make sure that we turn the sprite renderer enabled property to false so that that doesn't show up in the display. Now, if it hasn't been consumed, we want to make sure that it does show up, okay? Same thing here is if it's player 2 playing, we check to see if the tile did consume player 2, right? If player 2 consumed this tile, we want to make sure that the sprite renderer is not enabled by setting it to false. Otherwise, we want to make sure that the sprite renderer is enabled by setting it to true so that it shows up, okay? So, and that's pretty much what those two methods do. We are going to create another new method, and it's not really a method. It's like it's an enumerator, okay? So we're going to create that right after our start next level method, which is right here. So private void start next level, and then right below it, we're going to do enumerator process start next level, and we're going to pass in float delay as a parameter. Okay, and then the inside of this method is going to be very, very simple. We're going to set player text dot transform dot get component. We're going to set the text property to be enabled. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for ready text. Transform get component text enabled equals true, because we want both of those when we get ready to go to the next level. We want both of these to be true. Okay, And then we're going to say if is player 1 up. And if player 1 is up, we're going to say start coroutine, start blinking. Okay, so we have a blinking coroutine. That's player 1 up. And that is the that red player 1 up, player 2 up text that's on the right-hand side of the screen. Okay? Otherwise, if it's not player 1, we're going to start coroutine. Oops. Start blinking player 2 up. Okay, so if player 1's not playing, then we want to blink player 2 up. Pretty simple. Now we're going to call redraw board. And we're going to pass in yield new wait for seconds. And we're going to pass in the delay. And then we're going to start coroutine. Oh, yield, sorry, I forgot. Yield, return, new, wait for seconds. And then we're going to start a coroutine. And the coroutine we're going to start is process, restart, show objects, which is a coroutine that we've already created previously that we use for when we restart the level. Okay? We're going to use that same coroutine because the same things happen at that point and after. So we can use that same coroutine. Okay? So now that we've got that IEnumerator method created, we are going to go and modify the start next level. Okay? So first things first, we're going to remove this because we're no longer going to load or reload the scene. Okay? So we're going to first stop all coroutines. Okay? And then we're going to check to see if is player 1 up. So if it's player 1's turn. Otherwise, it's player 2's turn. Okay? And if it is player 1's turn, what we want to do is we want to reset pellets for player and pass in the number 1 because that's the first player. And then we're going to do game menu dot player 1 pellets consumed equals 0. And then here, if it's player 2, we're going to do reset pellets for player, pass in 2, and then game menu dot player 2 pellets consumed equals 0. Right? So basically what we're doing here is when we start the next level, we're stopping all the coroutines. So everything that's running in the background or parallel to our program currently, we're stopping all of that. And then what we're saying is, hey, is it player 1's turn right now? Well, it is. So we're going to reset all the pellets for player 1, meaning that all of the pellets that he consumed just now are all going to be set to false. Okay? And then we're going to set the player 1 pellets consumed to 0, so we're resetting the amount of pellets he consumed. Because the total pellets needs to equal the pellets consumed in order to win the level. So we reset the player 1 pellets consumed so that when he gets to the next level, that number can increment again all the way up to whatever total pellets is, so that those two can match again and he can go to the next level. And we do the same thing for player 2. Simple, right? So then, let's go down here, and then we do game object dot find. We're going to do maze. Okay, because remember, when our level changes, our maze starts blinking between white and blue. So what we have to do is we have to change the sprite to make sure that that actually equals blue. Because when I was testing this, what would happen is it would blink blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, blue, white, and then the last color that it blinked before it changed the level was white. So when the level restarted, the maze color was white. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. So here we're just making sure that the maze stays blue. Okay? So then we're going to, in here, also add did increment level. We're going to set that to false. And then, what have we got? We've got, oops. Yeah. So did increment level, we're going to set to false. And then we're going to say start coroutine, and we're going to do process start next level, and we're going to pass in 1 as the amount of time we want to wait. Alright, so that does that. We have to make a quick edit to our process restart show objects method, and that's a little further down. Process restart show objects. We need to actually add in here, we need to add ghost.transform.getComponent animator.enabled equals true, so that our animator object is enabled. And I don't know why that was never there to begin with. It should have been. And then what we need to do is we need to make a lot of changes to our process restart enumerator. So, and that starts right here, okay? Where we've got Pac-Man lives minus equals 1. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that. Pac-Man lives minus equals 1, because that's an error anyways. And what we're going to replace it with is if is player 1 up. We're going to say game menu dot player or lives player 1 minus equals 1. Else we know player 2 is playing, so we do lives player 2 minus equals 1. Alright, so now we need to check to see if the lives are 0 to trigger game over. Well, we only want to trigger an actual game over, like an actual going back to the game menu game over, if both player 1 and player 2 have 0 lives. So we want to say if game menu dot lives player 1 equals 0 and game menu dot lives player 2 equals 0, then we do the game over. Okay, it's the only time we want to do the game over, and that's why when we change the game to play as a player 1, we set the lives of player 2 to 0, so that that'll be true. Okay, so, and that's all we're doing in this if statement here. Now, right after here, start coroutine, process game over, we are going to enter a couple times, do a closing curly bracket, and we're going to do else if game menu dot lives player 1 equals 0 or game menu dot lives player 2 equals 0. Okay, so now what we're doing is we're checking to see, hey, if the player 1 doesn't have 0 lives and player 2 doesn't have 0 lives, is it possible that player 1 has 0 or player 2 has 0 lives? Well, if one of those is true, that means that one of them has a game over. So now what we do is we check to see which one. If game menu dot lives player 1 equals 0, that means that player 1 is game over. Otherwise, player 2 is game over. But we're also going to check that with an if statement. So else if game menu lives player 2 equals 0. Okay? So here's if player 1 is 0, and below is if player 2 is 0. So if player 1 is 0, all we want to do is player text dot transform dot get component text dot text equals player 1. Okay? And then for the other one, if it's player 2 that's game over, we're going to say player text transform dot get component text dot text equals player 2. Okay? So now we know whether or not player 1 or player 2 have a game over. Okay? So now what we need to do is we need to change the ready text. Okay, we need to change the text for the ready text to game over. So ready text, transform, get component, text equals game over. And then we need to change the color of ready text. So ready text, because it's yellow, we're going to transform, get component, text, color equals color dot red. And then we're going to set the enable property of ready text to true. So ready text dot transform, get component, text dot enabled equals true. Then we're going to get the Pac-Man game object, and we're going to store it in this variable. So game object Pac-Man equals game object dot find Pac-Man. And then we're going to set the transform, the sprite renderer enabled property to false. So Pac-Man dot transform dot get component sprite renderer dot enabled equals false. And then we're going to do transform dot, we're going to stop the audio source, so transform dot get component audio source dot stop. And finally we are going to start coroutine, process game over, and we're going to set that to 2. Alright, so process game over will then actually process the game over for that one player. No. I may have spoke too soon. Alright, let's get rid of all of all the way, actually just this last line, start coroutine, because we can't process the game over, because process game over is going to load the scene game menu. Well, we don't want that. So what we need to do is we need to yield return new wait for seconds delay. So we're going to wait for the amount of time that is being passed to that method. And we're going to say if not game menu dot is one player game. So if it's not a one player game, we're going to change is player one up to the opposite, is player one up. So if he is playing, then he's not, and if he isn't, then he is. So the next thing then would be if is player one up, checking to see if it's player one's turn, then we start our blinking coroutine to indicate that player one is about to start playing. And we're going to say player one up. Otherwise, it's player two, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start the coroutine, start blinking, player two up. Okay. Now, after that, we're going to want to redraw the board, and then we're going to check to see if player one is up. So if is player one up, again, we're going to say player text dot transform dot get component text dot text equals player one, else player text dot transform dot get component text equals player two. Alright? Because we want to, after we wait, okay, we want to change, because right here we do the game over bit, okay? So we do the game over stuff, and then we show that for a little while. We show the game over text. We show, yeah, we need to ready text, player text. We need to set player text, the text property to true. So player text transform get component text dot enabled equals true. All right. So we show all the text, and then we wait for a certain amount of time, and then we change up all the text. Okay, we change to whatever player's going to be playing now, and then we change our ready text back to ready. So ready text dot transform dot get component text dot text equals ready, and ready text, we got to change the color, transform get component text dot color equals, and we're going to create a new color, and that color is going to be 240F divided by 255F, 207F divided by 255F, 101F divided by 255F, and close that. And the reason that we do it this way is because the color expects a float between 0 and 1. Okay, so we have to give it a float value between 0 and 1. So we just divide by 255, and that'll give us our RGB values. Okay. Next, we need to yield return wait, or new wait for seconds, and we're going to wait for that same amount of time again. So we show that the new player is about to start playing, and then we start coroutine, process restart show objects, so we can show everything on the screen again, and then after that the game resumes like normal. Right? So then the only thing left is we need to modify some of the things in the else statement here, and that is we need to, right here after stop, we need to do if not game menu dot is one player game, then is player one up equals not is player one up. So we're doing the same thing. Okay, if is player one up, then we're going to start the coroutine to blink the proper text. So start blinking player one up, else it's player two. So we're going to start the coroutine, start blinking player two up. Okay, and then we're going to say if not game menu dot is one player game, so meaning it's a two player game. If is player one up, player text dot transform dot get component text dot text equals player one, otherwise player text dot transform dot get component text dot text equals player two. And after that we are going to call redraw board, and we are going to wait, and then we're going to start the coroutine process restart show objects. This else statement happens if there are no game overs, but the one player died and it's now the other player's turn. Okay, so the only thing we have left to do is we need to update our restart method. Okay, we have this restart method here, and the way we're going to start is at the top here, okay? We're going to add a variable. We're going to call it player level. We're going to set that equal to 0. We're going to say if is player 1 up, meaning it's player 1's turn. We're going to set player level equal to player 1 level, okay? Otherwise, player 2 is playing, so we're going to set player level equal to player 2 level. So basically, we're just storing player 1's level or player 2's level in the player level variable, depending on which one's playing. So we're going to do game object dot find Pac-Man. We're going to do get component. We're going to grab the Pac-Man script component, and we're going to say set difficulty for level, and we're going to pass in player level. Okay, that's why we had to make those methods public, so that we can set the difficulty for the level. And now we're going to iterate over the ghost. So we're going to do game object. I'm going to make it an array. Call it obj equals game object dot find game objects with tag, and the tag for those is ghost. Then we're going to do a for each loop, game object ghost and obj, and for every ghost we're going to do ghost dot transform dot get component ghost set difficulty for level, and we're going to pass in player level. Alright, and we've got the same stuff here, ready text, did start after death, all the other stuff looks good. Alright, so that should be it. Let's save that file and let's go to Unity. Let's go and save this scene really quick. And let's go to our scenes folder and open up game menu and click play. So when we click play on game menu, we're loaded up with our Pac-Man menu, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go down and we're going to select 2 players. Alright, so now as you can tell, we've got 1 up is flashing, okay? So now I'm going to kill myself on purpose. And notice the pellets that I'm consuming here. Alright, so I've got these and these. Alright, so now it says player 2 ready. We can tell player 2 is up. And all the pellets came back. So now I'm going to grab, I'm going to try to grab all of these so that we can see. Alright, see, I've even got a super pellet. Alright, so I'm going to grab that whole bottom section pretty much. So that when we start back with player 1, you'll see that all of this bottom half is missing. So now I'm going to just wait for one of the ghosts to catch me. Bam. Alright, so now we should see player 1 ready, and see how the pellets are back where they need to be for player 1. Alright, so I'm going to try to beat this level. Why not get some points while I'm at it? Oh, I didn't see that guy. Alright, player 2. We'll beat it with player 2. Oh, what? That was close. Alright, okay, so we get to go to level 2. with player 2. See how player 2 ready and player 2 up is still blinking? Alright. See how we're going faster? I'll show you that when I die with this one, once we get back to player 1, you'll see that player 1 moves much slower because he's still on level 1. Gotta tell you, all of this developing Pac-Man makes me feel like I've started to become an expert at the game. Now I'm on level 3. I gotta tell you, like, once you get to like level 5, where the ghosts and Pac-Man are like super fast, the game becomes so much more intense. It's like everything just feels so super fast right now. I should probably just kill myself. Yeah, I'm gonna kill myself this round. Come on, Pinky. Don't let me down. Alright. So now we're gonna get back to player 1, and player 1 will be super slow. Because he's still on level 1. And now I'm gonna show you what happens with the game over. Because I'm gonna let player 1 die. So now you'll see, it should say player 1 game over, and then go back to player 2 at his level. There we go. Whoa, that was so close. Ah, now it's game over, game over. Now it'll go back to the main menu. Alright, and that is it. That is 2-player gameplay on Pac-Man. Alright, this video is super long, and I'm sorry about that. I tried to make it as short as possible. You know, Pac-Man has been so much fun to develop, and it is so awesome to see how far it's come as a game. And the fact that we can create this game in Unity and bring back such nostalgia that we've had with these, you know, old retro arcade games, it's amazing. I love it. And I'm going to continue doing it. And I've had some really great suggestions from a lot of you for what to do next, and so I'd like to say thank you for that. I'm going to go through and see what we've got. I don't know if there's going to be a video next week because, you know, if I'm developing something new, I'm probably going to need a little bit of time to actually, you know, start to actually develop it and create notes for it and figure out which direction I'm going to take it. So if there's not a video next week, don't be too disappointed. If I think of anything else to add to Pac-Man, or if there's anything else that you guys would like to see on Pac-Man before we put it to rest, let me know in the comments, and I'll see if I can add some more, go over it, and whatever. I'd like to thank you all for subscribing, you know, and continuously coming back to watch the channel. We've had now, all in all, over 100,000 views all together on all the videos on the channel, which is amazing. I think it's absolutely incredible. I never thought that I was gonna have this wide of an audience on such a niche channel, which is nice. You know, I'm glad that you guys are getting stuff out of it. We are almost at 900 subscribers, which means that we're almost at 1,000. We have literally like 100 left to go, and we're at 1,000 subscribers. That is a huge milestone for me on YouTube. I never, ever thought that I was going to get this many. So it'll be great. I'm going to have to figure out something really awesome to do for the 1,000 subscribers. Maybe I'll do like a, I don't know. I have no idea. You guys, if you have any ideas of what you might want to see for the 1,000 subscriber episode, let me know. Comments. That would be great. Another shout out to Mark. Mark, thank you for continuously supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it. And one more thing. One more thing. Guys, if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget, comments go down below. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys next week.